You walk into a room full of people who seem to know exactly who they are and where they belong. You smile, you make conversation, you do all the right things. But somewhere underneath all of it, there is this quiet, persistent hum, like a radio that never quite tunes in. You feel like you are watching your own life from slightly outside of it. And the strangest part is that this happens even when things are going well. And by the end of this, you will understand why feeling out of place might not be a sign that something is wrong with you, but the clearest signal that something real is trying to wake up inside you. Let us sit with this for a moment, because this feeling deserves more than a quick fix. You have probably tried the obvious things. You have changed your social circle, your city, your job, maybe even your identity a few times. You have followed the advice to just be yourself, without anyone ever explaining what that means or how to do it. And the feeling follows you anyway, like a shadow that refuses to stay behind you. Here is the paradox at the center of this. We live in the most connected era in human history, and yet loneliness and alienation have never been more widespread. The philosopher and psychologist Erich Fromm saw this coming decades ago. In his 1956 book, The Art of Loving, he wrote that the deepest need of man is the need to overcome his separateness, to leave the prison of his aloneness. But here is what Fromm also understood that most self-help culture ignores. The problem is not that you have failed to connect. The problem is that modern society actively conditions you to feel like a stranger to yourself and then sells you products and identities to fill the gap. The conventional answer to feeling out of place is to find your tribe, find your people, find where you belong. It sounds right. It feels right. But if you follow that advice without understanding why you feel displaced in the first place, you end up just collecting more belonging without ever feeling truly at home. You join the community, the group, the subculture, and after a few months, the hum comes back. You start wondering if maybe this group is not quite right either, and the cycle continues. So let us go deeper. The feeling of being out of place has a name in psychology. It is called alienation, and it is not a modern invention, but modern life has perfected the conditions that produce it. The sociologist and philosopher Karl Marx originally used the term to describe how industrial work separated people from the products of their labor, from the process of making things, from other people, and ultimately, from themselves. But you do not need to work in a factory for this to apply to you. The same structure plays out in any context, where who you are required to be on the surface does not match what is actually alive inside you. There is a fascinating body of research on something called self-concept clarity, which is basically the degree to which your sense of who you are feels stable, clear, and internally consistent. Psychologist Jennifer Campbell at the University of British Columbia has studied this extensively. What she found is that people with low self-concept clarity, meaning people who are uncertain or confused about who they are, report significantly higher levels of anxiety, depression, and yes, that pervasive sense of not quite fitting in. Not because the world rejected them, but because they cannot locate a stable center from which to engage with the world at all. You feel out of place because the you that is supposed to be placed somewhere is still being formed, and no one told you that was allowed to take this long. There's another layer here, and this one is harder to sit with. Roy Baumeister, a social psychologist who has spent decades studying the self, found that much of what we call our identity is actually built through the stories we tell about ourselves. We are, in a very real sense, narrative creatures. We make meaning by constructing a coherent story with a beginning, a middle, and a direction. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Many of us are living stories that were handed to us, the career that made sense to our parents, the version of success that our culture endorses, the personality we performed so well in high school that we forgot it was a performance. And when you are living someone else's story, of course you feel like a stranger in your own life. You are one. There is a metaphor I keep coming back to when I think about this. Imagine you spent years memorizing a map of a city. You know every street name, every landmark, every shortcut. You can navigate it perfectly. But the city on the map is not the city you actually live in. The streets have different names. The landmarks mean different things. You look competent on paper and completely lost in practice. That is what it feels like to be fluent in an identity that does not belong to you. You can perform it flawlessly and still feel like you have no idea where you are. And here is something that makes this worse. Social media has industrialized the performance of identity. You are not just managing how you come across in the room anymore. You are curating a coherent self across platforms, across years, across audiences, all at the same time. A study published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology in 2018 found a direct causal link between passive social media use, meaning scrolling without engaging, and increases in both depression and loneliness. And the researchers, Melissa Hunt and her colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania, found that when participants limited their social media use to roughly 30 minutes per day, their well-being improved significantly. The mechanism is not complicated. When you spend hours watching other people appear to belong, to have found their thing, to be at home in their lives, it amplifies the hum inside you. You are not seeing their displacement. You're only seeing the performance of placement. And your brain, which evolved to compare, starts writing a story where everyone else figured it out and you are still standing in the doorway. Let me sit with you in that discomfort for a second before I offer anything that resembles a solution, because I think there is something important in not rushing past it. The feeling of being out of place is genuinely painful. It is not dramatic. It is not a crisis you can point to. It is more like a slow gray weather that settles over everything. And because it is not dramatic, people rarely take it seriously enough to actually examine it. They just try to push through, do more, connect more, achieve more, and then wonder why they still feel the same. The philosopher Albert Camus would recognize exactly what you are describing. He called it the absurd, this collision between the human need for clarity, meaning, and belonging, and the world's complete silence on the matter. The world does not tell you who you are. The world does not arrange itself so that you fit perfectly somewhere. And Camus argued that pretending otherwise, constructing false certainties and borrowed identities, is a kind of philosophical suicide. You stop asking the real questions. You fill the space with noise. But here is where I want to offer a reframe, because I do not think the answer is to simply accept the void and make peace with rootlessness. That is not quite right either. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, spent his career studying what he called individuation, which is the process of becoming a fully realized self. Not a perfect self, not an optimized self, a whole one. Jung believed that the feeling of being out of place, that sense of alienation and incompleteness, was not a malfunction. It was an invitation. He wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And what he meant by that is not some romantic notion of discovering a pre-existing essence. He meant the active, often uncomfortable, lifelong work of distinguishing between what you actually value and what you have been conditioned to perform. Here is what this looks like in practice. Every human being develops what Jung called a persona, which is the social mask, the version of yourself you present to the world to navigate social expectations. The persona is not bad. It is necessary. You need to be able to adjust your communication depending on whether you are talking to your grandmother or your coworker. The problem comes when the persona becomes so thick, so calcified, that you can no longer find the difference between the mask and the face underneath. You forget which parts of you are genuinely yours and which parts were assembled in response to fear, approval seeking, or survival. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps and went on to develop logotherapy, a form of psychotherapy centered on meaning, had a slightly different angle on this. Frankl argued that the primary human drive is not pleasure or power, but meaning. And what he observed, both in the camps and in his clinical work afterward, is that people who feel most alienated, most out of place, are almost always people who have not yet found, or have lost contact with, their own sense of meaning. Not happiness, not success. Meaning. There is a difference. Happiness is something that happens to you. Meaning is something you construct through engagement with what actually matters to you. And this is where the reframe becomes most important. The question is not, where do I belong, in the sense of finding a pre-existing slot in the world with your name on it. The question is something more like, what am I oriented toward? Or, what do I find it impossible not to care about, even when caring is inconvenient? The philosopher Aristotle had a concept for this. He called it eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but more accurately understood as flourishing, or living in alignment with your deepest nature and highest capacities. Aristotle believed that every human being has a telos, a kind of inner direction, a natural tendency toward a particular way of thriving. And he argued that the anxiety and restlessness we feel is not evidence that life is meaningless. It is evidence that we are living in friction with our own telos. You feel out of place, not because you have no place, but because the place you are occupying does not match the direction you are actually built for. What I find beautiful and honest about this framing is that it does not promise you a destination. It does not say that once you figure out your purpose, you will never feel displaced again. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius in particular, were very clear that life will always contain friction, uncertainty, and circumstances beyond your control. But what you can control, and what they insisted you cultivate, is your inner orientation. The question is not whether the room fits. The question is whether you know which direction you are facing. Now, knowing all of this intellectually is one thing. I want to be honest with you about that. I have read all the books and still found myself at 2 a.m. feeling like a stranger in my own life. There is a real gap between understanding something and actually inhabiting it. So let me offer a few things that I think are genuinely useful, not as homework, but as gentle invitations to start paying a different kind of attention. The first is what I would call the subtraction question. Instead of asking yourself what you want or what you are passionate about, which are enormous questions that often produce either panic or cliché answers, try asking yourself what you do not want. What drains you in a way that feels like more than just tiredness? What situations make you feel most invisible, most unlike yourself? What have you been doing for years primarily because stopping felt harder than continuing? This is not about quitting everything. It is about starting to trace the outline of yourself by noticing what genuinely costs you something. Jung talked about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we push into the dark because they do not fit the persona we are maintaining. Asking the subtraction question is a way of letting a little light into those corners. The second invitation is what I would call building one true thing, not a complete reinvention of your life, not a 5-year plan. Just one area, one relationship, one practice, one project, where you commit to engaging from what actually feels real in you rather than from what is expected of you. It could be as small as the way you have a conversation. It could be finally starting the creative work you have been quietly thinking about for years. The philosopher Simone Weil, one of the most underrated thinkers of the 20th century, wrote about the concept of attention, which she defined as a kind of complete, unpossessive, present tense engagement with whatever is in front of you. She believed this kind of attention was the closest humans could get to genuine contact with reality. And there is something about practicing it in one small area of life that starts to change the texture of everything else. Not dramatically, slowly, but the hum starts to change pitch. The third invitation is perhaps the hardest. It is to allow yourself to not know. I have noticed that a huge amount of the distress that comes with feeling out of place is not just the feeling itself, but the meta-level anxiety about the feeling. The story you tell yourself is that by now you should know. You should have figured out where you belong. You should have a stable, confident sense of who you are. And every moment you do not have that is being filed as evidence of failure. But here is what is actually true. The philosopher Charles Taylor, in his landmark book, Sources of the Self, argues that identity is not a fixed thing we find, but a horizon we move toward. It is constituted by the questions we keep asking, not by the answers we finally arrive at. Giving yourself permission to be in the process, to be in the question, is not resignation. It is the most honest and actually the most courageous stance available to you. And here is something I want to say directly, because I think it matters. The fact that you feel out of place is not nothing. It is information. People who have completely merged with a social role and stopped questioning rarely feel that hum. The hum is uncomfortable, but it is the sound of something in you that has not given up. It is the part of you that still knows there is a difference between performing a life and actually living one. That part is worth listening to, even when listening is uncomfortable, even when it does not give you clean answers. There is a line from the poet Rainer Maria Rilke, from his Letters to a Young Poet, written in 1903, that I have returned to more times than I can count. He wrote, "I would like to beg you, dear sir, as well as I can, to have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Do not search for the answers, which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is, to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then, someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. That is the invitation, not to fix the feeling of being out of place, not to manufacture certainty about who you are, but to stay curious about the question, to treat your own displacement not as a diagnosis, but as a direction. If you feel out of place, you are not broken. You are paying attention. This topic connects to something larger, the conversation about who we are underneath all of the roles we play, and how to live more honestly inside a world that rewards performance. If this is the kind of conversation you want more of, subscribing means you will not miss the next one. And I am genuinely curious, what is one role or identity you have been performing for so long that you are no longer sure if it belongs to you?